It's time for you to sound off, for you to speak your mind. This show is for the faithful. Touchdown! Dub Nation.
Bang! Steph Curry again!
And the seam heads that bleed orange and black. Good man! This is Sports Phone KNBR. Sponsored by Industrial Metal Supply on the Sports Leader. Check the live stream on YouTube at KNBR 1045.
0-2, 2 outs. And a high chopper fielded by Baker to first base. That will do it. The American League will end up beating the National League 4-0 after getting 3 in the first and a Vargas blast late. A dominant pitching performance by John Schneider's American League squad.
We are back. Tuesday evening post All-Star break. Let's put the first half behind us, folks. And quite honestly, let's put this All-Star game behind us. A snoozer, if you will. I tried to keep my attention glued to the television tonight, but the National League offense was pretty lifeless this evening, and the American League pitching staff just overwhelmed the National League crew of hitters. Luis Arraez only getting 1 at bat. I think that was my biggest takeaway from the game. The National League didn't have enough hits for Luis Arraez to get his second plate appearance in that ball game. Really disappointing, and ultimately just kind of a quiet evening in Philadelphia after what was really a tremendous night on Monday. I was live during Sports Phone, so I didn't have the opportunity to watch the home run derby, but I went back immediately after and caught the final round. And my goodness, Jordan Walker, the performance that he put on Monday evening at Citizens Bank Park, that will go down as one of my favorite home run derby performances that I've seen through the years. And I was listening to Murph and Marcus on my way into the office this morning, and they were talking about some of the great home run derbies that they remember through the years. And we all kind of went to Josh Hamilton and the remarkable performance he had sometime around, I don't know, was it 2009, 2010, where he hit like 28 home runs in the first round. No one really remembers if he won that home run derby or not. I couldn't tell you. I didn't look it up today. I don't remember, and I don't care to remember because I have such a vivid memory of being so joyful when that happened for Josh Hamilton. But I will tell you, the new format with what Major League Baseball did and trialed on Monday evening, we will all remember Jordan Walker with the swing countdown, just going shot for shot, knocking the ball out of Citizens Bank Park and proving that he was going to be the champion. I think that was one of the best finishes we've ever seen to a home run derby, and for a player who has shown a lot about resilience and about how player development is nonlinear, I think there are some lessons to be applied for San Francisco Giants players and prospects who kind of stalled out at the major league level, prospects who haven't necessarily lived up to the hype. I mean, you could make the comparison that someone who had a very similar trajectory in the minor leagues and on top prospect lists to Jordan Walker was Marco Luciano. And I don't think it's going to pan out for Luciano in the Yankees organization, even though he's having a heck of a year at the minor league level. I don't think he's ever going to become an all-star at the major league level. But you have to remember, when these guys come up at 21 and 22 years old, and they've got the weight of the world on their shoulders, and they've been told since they graduated high school that they're going to be superstars, that they are going to take over the sport, and they meet failure for the very first time. Like, they get through high A and double A and triple A, and they soar through and they coast through and they keep moving up those prospect rankings into the top 10. And I know that some of them aren't looking at them and reading them every day, but they know. They know where they are. Their teammates remind them where they are. The way that people inside the organization talk about them, that reminds them where they are. When they meet failure at the major league level, and this has happened time and time again with Giants prospects in recent years, whether it be Luciano or Luis Matos or even Kyle Harrison when he struggled in 24 and 25 before the trade, it is oh so difficult to figure it out. It is oh so difficult to go from being that guy, the dude, the future face of the franchise to, you know what, I might just be another guy. I might just blend in with my peers. I might not be everything that everyone told me I was going to be. To come back from that failure, to come back from being lost, to come back from being shuttled between AAA and the big leagues. And God knows the Giants have had dozens of players have that happen to them over the course of the last decade. And then to come out the other side of it, like Jordan Walker did for the St. Louis Cardinals, be named an All-Star and then go to the Home Run Derby and more than double your 2026 salary. Guy's making $749,000. Not bad. I'd take that money. But he won $1 million on Monday evening. He continues to rewrite his story. I think there are a lot of folks who can take a lot away from that. And it gives you an appreciation as well, not just for the guys who have a pedigree and a narrative arc quite like Jordan Walker's, but also an appreciation for the guys who come up to the big league level at 21, 22 years old and do figure it out and are immediately that dude and are immediately able to embrace the face of the franchise type expectations that are placed on them. I look at a guy who participated in tonight's All-Star game, in Bryce Harper. The guy was on the cover of Sports Illustrated at 16 years old. Number 1 overall draft pick at 17. And he's a Hall of Fame player. He has lived up to the hype. Did he win a World Series? No, but man, signing a $300+ million contract and at times making it look like a bargain for the Philadelphia Phillies, that has worked out. The Giants wish that Harper had taken their money coming into that 2019 season. And it gives me an appreciation for a guy like Bryce Eldridge, the current emerging face of the San Francisco Giants, who at 21 years old came up, and think about the weeks that we spent in the month of May right here on KNBR on Sportsphone debating whether or not Bryce Eldridge was an everyday player, whether or not the Giants were doing the right thing by his development. And then all of a sudden, they give him playing time, he forces the issue, and he doesn't really look back. And sure, Bryce Eldridge will have his struggles. He's had them over the course of the last few weeks. He struggled. But his batting average is still above 260. His OPS is still above 800. And by and large, he's the best hitter on this San Francisco Giants team. Like, you want a guy up in a clutch moment on Friday evening in Seattle when the Giants are back in action? I don't want Rafi Devers. I don't want Matt Chapman or Willie Adames. And Chapman, of course, on the IL right now. I want Bryce Eldridge. Every high-leverage plate appearance, I want the 21-year-old kid right now. And it's not just a fact that the Giants are 41-55 and he will gain from that experience. But I want him because I truly believe that at this moment, there is no one more equipped to handle that moment than Bryce Eldridge. And so it just goes to show there are different ways to develop in Major League Baseball, different ways to become a high-impact contributor. Jordan Walker's story in the St. Louis Cardinals organization was not all that different from the one that Bryce Eldridge had right here in San Francisco, taken out of James Madison High in Fairfax, Virginia. But Eldridge so far has come up and been ready, been that dude, whereas Jordan Walker, his career arc kind of mirrored that of an Elliot Ramos, although Walker a far more productive player than I think even Ramos was in 2024 when he earned that All-Star nod for the San Francisco Giants. But think about Ramos's trajectory. 2017 first-round draft pick out of high school, Leadership Christian Academy in Puerto Rico. Ramos has all the expectations at 17 years old of becoming a big league player. I listened to him in the dugout the day that he arrived in San Francisco. He was barely able to speak English at that point, which is remarkable considering he is one of the most fun and engaging players in the clubhouse at 25, 26 years old now. His ability to not just learn English, but master it, and it's really a riveting story in its own right. But Ramos was in the dugout that day saying, I want to be in the big leagues in 2 to 3 seasons. I want to come up and be that guy. And it took him a while. It took until 22 when I think he played, 9 games? 23 when he played, 25 games? And then 24 spring training, Farhan Zaidi, president of baseball operations, he had Elliot Ramos down as like the 7th or 8th outfielder on the depth chart. Elliot Ramos was one of the first players cut during spring training and optioned back to AAA Sacramento and minor league camp down in Scottsdale. No one expected anything from him that year. It was his 7th year in the organization, and people have kind of given up on Elliot Ramos at that point, but he was just 24 years old. And he used that opportunity, being cut, being sent back to minor league camp to rewrite his story and to prove that there was still development ahead of him and he was still capable of great things at the big league level. So in early May when he got the call and he just started to hit and hit and hit, Elliot Ramos was ready for that moment. And he has struggled, in my opinion, to kind of recapture that magic that he showed in 2024. But it was not that dissimilar from the career arc of Jordan Walker with the St. Louis Cardinals. And Walker was a far more hyped prospect, had kind of faced the franchise written all over him. It was akin to the experience that Bryce Eldridge had in the minor leagues for the San Francisco Giants. But like Jordan Walker, Elliot Ramos struggled when he first came up. He was hitting under 200. He was making mistakes in the outfield. And when he got his chance as a full-time, everyday player in 2024, he seized it. And so far, he has not relinquished that starting job. There's been times where he's been injured and off the field, but for the most part, the Giants trust Elliot Ramos to hit at the top of their lineup. Right-hander, left-hander on the mound, they trust this guy. And so there are other players who can take away from this story and continue to show that, hey, you don't have to be defined by your first 2-3 years at the big league level. No better example right now in the San Francisco Giants lineup than someone who probably could have been at Citizens Bank Park this evening. And that's Casey Schmidt. 19 home runs in the first half of the season. For a guy who was relegated to the bench by the Giants organization with the moves that they made this offseason. They were determined to add a second baseman. Think about the rumors before Luis Arias signed with the San Francisco Giants. It was, hey, the Giants are in on Brendan Donovan if the Cardinals trade him. It was, hey, the Giants are in on Nico Horner if the Cubs trade him. And then finally it was, hey, the Giants have signed Luis Arias to a 1-year, $12 million deal. At no point were they giving an indication that Casey Schmidt was their guy. And as a result, he came into spring training, chip on his shoulder, ready to go. And at 27 years old, he is having the breakout season that has been so desperately needed for him and for this organization. He was very nearly the third position player since they drafted Brandon Belt way back in 2009 to be drafted by the Giants and make an all-star team. Since Belt came up in 2011, and Belt and Crawford and Buster Posey were making all-star teams together, since Belt was a fourth-round draft pick in 2009, the Giants in the last 15, 16 years, it's hard for me to really count the 2024 and 2025 drafts, but in the last, say, 15 years, have produced two position players to make an all-star team out of their farm system and in their organization at the big league level. I'm not counting Brian Reynolds, who was traded to the Pittsburgh Pirates in that woeful Andrew McCutchen deal entering that 2018 season. It was 2015, Joe Panik at second base. It was 2024, Elliot Ramos in the outfield. It was very nearly 2020 second-round draft pick Casey Schmidt making the All-Star team this year. And if he does this next year with the exact same numbers, exact same positional versatility, I can guarantee you he will be in the All-Star game in Chicago at Wrigley Field next year. To me, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, to be an All-Star as someone who doesn't come up with a top 100 prospect pedigree, as someone who doesn't come up much hyped and doesn't come onto the scene and immediately spark joy in a fan base for a 3 to 4 month period. You kind of have to have an all-star season before you're named an all-star. This was true of Logan Webb in 22 and 23 before he first became an all-star in 2024. You could make the case he was very deserving in each of those seasons. And I think this will be true of Casey Schmidt. If he puts up the exact same numbers next year, to me, Casey will be an all-star. And so pedigree has a lot to do with the way that people are judged in Major League Baseball. Jordan Walker, because he had this tremendous pedigree in the St. Louis Cardinals organization, he was viewed as the can't-miss prospect, and then he was viewed as the big bust, the guy who was never going to get it done. And what does he do but rewrite his story the beginning of this season and on Monday evening at Citizens Bank Park with a remarkable performance in the Home Run Derby? Elliot Ramos, someone who was viewed as a bust in the Giants organization, just another in a long line of them. First-round draft picks who couldn't quite cut it at the Major League level, who weren't very good at the Major League level. And then 2024 was when everyone is ready to give up on him, when people inside his own organization are giving up on him. Elliot Ramos proves he's a big leaguer. Same is true of Casey Schmidt. And look, there was a backup role for him on this team. He was viewed as a bench player coming into this season, but the Giants did not anticipate that Casey Schmidt would be hitting third for this ball club, that he would be far more reliable than a Willie Adames at this point, a Matt Chapman to this point. Even though Chapman's WAR is higher, it's been Schmidt who's been the far better offensive player this season for the San Francisco Giants. And you can make the case that because he plays so many different positions, he's been a more valuable defensive player. That's not a case we need to debate right here and now on the air, but Schmidt having a good season. Ramos rewrote his career in 24. Jordan Walker, in similar fashion, has done that with the St. Louis Cardinals. And those are just some of my takeaways from the Home Run Derby, from the All-Star festivities, from an otherwise very boring game. Another disappointment, another clunker. I always look forward to the Midsummer Classic, but it feels to me, and maybe just because the Giants have been this team through the years, it feels to me like some pitcher always just gives up a 3 spot. And it's been Logan Webb, it's been Matt Cain, it's been Johnny Cueto. There's a long list of San Francisco Giants who've been that guy. And tonight it was Christopher Sanchez. And that's how an All-Star game is decided. Just one pitcher off his game, gives up a 3 spot, and case closed. National League loses. That's kind of how those things go. That's why the All-Star game has lost a little appeal to me. But hey, the Home Run Derby, it might be back right now. It might just be back. I'm Kerry Crowley. The show is Sports Phone KNBR. If you want to dial in, 415-808-KNBR is the number. We're not going to go too long tonight. We'll probably give this another 30, 45 minutes. Unless we get phone calls, then I'll stay on with you until 2 a.m. But we don't have some sort of a Mike Holler mandate this evening. Rafael Corral behind the scenes so far tonight, and I think Raf's going to stick with us the rest of the evening as well, unless I'm putting him to sleep right now with my commentary. So 415-808-KNBR is the number. We'll talk more All-Star festivities and also get into some of the comments that Rob Manfred, Major League Baseball Commissioner, and Bruce Meyer, Interim Executive Director of the Players Association, had today regarding the 2028 All-Star Game that could take place in San Francisco at Oracle Park and the frosty state of negotiations between the Players Union and the owners at the moment. I'm Kerry Crowley. We were rolling with you right here on KNBR, the sports leader.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys. It sound right, boys.
I mean, I can't still believe that this guy don't get a multi-year deal. I know things hasn't worked well out there in San Francisco. This guy, all he does is hit. Doesn't strike out. He walks more. Oh, they're talking about, well, the guy can't run. Well, he's scoring some run over plus 42 or 43 runs. Then the guy's only had 16 strikeout and 400 plus player at-bats. The guy's playing great defense as well. I think there's a lot of things out there that can need a Luis Arraez. And I know I heard he doesn't want to move, but there's a lot of things out there that need his bat. And a guy for myself, they appreciate because I came in an era, guys like that, like Tony Wynn, guys that hit over 300, 360 to win a batting title. I mean, what he's doing is really impressive. And in an era that all you want is ball out of the ballpark, this guy is kind of getting on the look.
Giants fans, this is your hub to have your voice heard. Sports Phone KNBR. Streaming live on YouTube at KNBR 1045.
We are back here on Sports Phone KNBR. Kerry Crowley rolling with you till basically whenever we feel like it tonight. 415-808-KNBR is the number. The voice you heard there was Albert Pujols on the broadcast earlier today talking about Luis Arraez of the San Francisco Giants, and not sure we will be able to say that sentence much longer. Arraez almost certainly set to be traded sometime within the next 3 weeks before the August 3rd trade deadline, but to be quite honest with you, was relatively disappointed. Arraez only got one opportunity in tonight's All-Star game, a 4-0 defeat for the National League. American League pitchers just completely overwhelmed the NL from the start. Dylan Cease picking up where he left off at Oracle Park last week, got the start for the American League. A little controversial decision to start Dylan Cease over Cam Schlittler of the New York Yankees. Schlittler having the better season objectively, but Cease so hot of late, including his dominant performance against the Giants on Wednesday, that it helps to have your own manager managing your ball club. And John Schneider of the Toronto Blue Jays tabbing Cease over Cam Schlittler. So Schlittler decides, you know what, I'm not going to pitch this evening, and Cease struck out 3 guys in the first inning. So it worked out for him and for the American League. Christopher Sanchez gives up 3 runs for the National League early on. Miguel Vargas adds on for the American League. The Chicago White Sox player with a home run late. Kind of a moonshot that Vargas hit in that ball game. I think it was 7th or 8th inning against Justin Wrobleski of the Los Angeles Dodgers. Dodgers just, growing guys who throw 97 from the left side on trees. It's unbelievable how they're able to do that. But nevertheless, the Giants didn't get much from the All-Star game. Logan Webb did not pitch. Luis Arraez has 1 plate appearance, and so not a whole lot for us to talk about on that front. And I was joking around with our producer, Rafael Corral, during the commercial break. Last night on Sports Phone, I went into what I typically do to try to fill a little bit of time before a commercial break, when I know we've got a mark to hit, I'll say, you know what? It's time to go to the out-of-town scoreboard because, to be quite honest with you, the origins of me going to the out-of-town scoreboard when I need to fill a little bit of time on KNBR are me listening to John Miller and Dave Fleming and Dwayne Kuiper in my youth. And, you get to the 5th or 6th inning of a Giants game and they're trailing 5-1 and you don't need to talk about the game anymore. They just go to the Toyota out-of-town scoreboard. And when John Miller would read it, I would always find it to be the most riveting segment of radio possible. I didn't care what was going on in Cincinnati between the Reds and the Pirates, but John made me care. Listening to the out-of-town scoreboard, he said, oh, we've got a real good one. Homer Bailey, 7 strong for the Cincinnati Reds. And I was thinking, how did this become my absolute favorite thing? But ever since I started on the radio about a decade ago, I, too, have tried to go to the out-of-town scoreboard, and I don't know if people like it or not. I've never quite gotten the feedback on that, whether or not you care what's going on around the wide world of sports beyond the Bay Area. And something tells me that I was pretty unique in that category to think that, what was happening in Kansas City was just as riveting as, the San Francisco Giants game at hand or the Golden State Warriors roster dilemma or the San Francisco 49ers preparing for training camp. But the out-of-town scoreboard was always great to me. So last night on the show, had a few minutes to fill before a commercial break, before we were going to have our guest, Michael Monreal, on. And I thought, you know what? Let's go to the out-of-town scoreboard. And I go, and I remember, it's the Home Run Derby. It's the quietest week in all of sports. There is no out-of-town scoreboard right now. There was nothing transpiring. I could have read Summer League games, I suppose, but that was it. That was our out-of-town scoreboard. So in honor of that moment, today, the out-of-town scoreboard, Rafael Corral, we're going to the World Cup. Spain 2, France nothing, and that's it. I'm not going to tell you that the Warriors were embarrassed by the Memphis Grizzlies in Summer League play because who cares about Summer League scores? Yaxel Lenneborg did score in double figures yet again for Golden State, but again, we don't need to go through the Summer League scores from Las Vegas. This is really the only week of the year you can't do the out-of-town scoreboard. You can always find something in the NBA, NHL. You can preview NFL matchups. Major League Baseball's got something for you every day of the week. No out-of-town scoreboard during the All-Star break. So one thing that threatens the out-of-town scoreboard in the future, 2027 specifically, is the rather frosty state of labor negotiations and labor relations between Major League Baseball's owners and the Players Association. This has come to a head this week with Rob Manfred, the Major League Baseball Commissioner, and Bruce Meyer, the Interim Executive Director of the Players Association, both speaking independently today to Baseball Writers Association of America beat reporters at Citizens Bank Park or a hotel adjacent to Citizens Bank Park at the annual luncheon. And one of the topics that came up, I believe John Shea, the San Francisco Standard, even asked about this, was the potential for Major League Baseball players to participate in the Olympics in 2028 and whether that would trigger an all-star game in San Francisco. Because there's been widespread belief that if players participate in the Olympics, and it's LA 2028, so you'd have baseball in the Olympics at Dodger Stadium, be major leaguers participating for the first time ever, you want the All-Star game close by, and you'd run the All-Star game in the middle of July, and then later that week, you'd start a 6-team Olympic tournament, and there's all sorts of chaos as to which 6 teams qualify for that tournament, but the U.S. obviously would as the host of the Olympics. And Bruce Meyer, Interim Executive Director of the Players Association, says, as far as I know, San Francisco is the site, essentially confirming that that's what's happening. And Rob Manfred spoke to John Shea, the San Francisco Standard, and he wrote about this. And Rob was like, as far as I know, Bruce doesn't make the rules. Bruce doesn't make the calls with regard to the All-Star game, which is a way of saying, if there is this much animosity over the site of an All-Star game 2 years from now, how do you think these two sides are going to hash out a new collective bargaining agreement that allows players to be on the field come April 1st of next year? For the most part, I have tried to be an optimist. I have tried to be one of the few contrarian voices in media saying they will figure it out because there's too much money at stake. There's too much money at stake for the players to lose, the owners to lose. They both need one another. They need one another to put a product on the field, and they can't let what happened in 1994, 1995, that strike, take down the progress that baseball has made, in my opinion, over the last 4 or 5 seasons. I think the baseball is working its way back in the mainstream across the United States in a way that maybe it wasn't, 10 years ago. It had fallen out of favor a little bit, and I think as technology continues to progress, as AI becomes more prevalent in our everyday lives, we love the routine of baseball. We love the traditions of baseball, the opportunity to be outside, the normalcy, the schedule that's associated with it. 162-game season, there's the long, plodding marathon, and you get to cheer for something from March 25th all the way through, if your team is lucky enough, to October 25th. And so that's why I've tried to hold out hope and say, I think these two sides are going to figure it out. But if you read the comments from Manfred and from Meyer on a wide array of issues, man, it does not sound good. Aside from the fact that you've got Bruce Meyer saying San Francisco is the site, and Rob Manfred saying Bruce doesn't make the decisions with regard to All-Star games, which is true, there's also the complication of Major League Baseball is potentially allowing players to participate in the Olympics. Evan Drellick of The Athletic, who does a great job covering baseball and labor, he wrote today that Major League Baseball wants big leaguers to face an effective suspension longer than 3 weeks, a period that would last to the second half of the regular season, if they are chosen to participate in the 2028 Olympics in LA but skip out on the games without an approved excuse. That, to me, is crazy. They are putting the Olympics as a bargaining tool for this upcoming CBA. Players want to participate. Major league teams want their players to participate. But to me, you cannot mandate participation in an event that is not sanctioned by Major League Baseball. How does Major League Baseball have any sort of say or control over the Olympics? I think that if teams want to go to a guy and say, we really don't want you to participate, they can probably have that conversation, but they can't prevent a guy from participating if Major League Baseball ultimately gives the approval. And if they do, they don't have a say over mandating participation. Like if Logan Webb is in line in 2028 to potentially pitch in the Olympics, think about this scenario. If he's a member of the San Francisco Giants, Logan Webb doesn't rewrite his contract, doesn't draw up a new deal, by the time the Olympics roll around in 2028, he will be in the final year of a 5-year, $90 million contract. He will be nearing the end of his prime, but will also have an opportunity in free agency to once again sign a huge contract, potentially a 9-figure deal at that point, because he'll still be under 30 years old and still, in my opinion, have the desired skill set to go help a big-time rotation, whether it's with the Giants or elsewhere. I think Webb, come 2028, would be a coveted free agent. If he says, I don't want the extra mileage on my arms from the Olympics, I'm fine doing the World Baseball Classic every few years, but the Olympics, it's just not going to work for me. Major League Baseball would then suspend him for 3 weeks. That just doesn't make any sense to me. So these are the types of issues that they're trying to hash out. It's not just the salary cap, which I think is a terrible thing for Major League Baseball owners to be advocating for. I know there are a lot of folks around San Francisco who say, well, it's how you stop the Dodgers. It's how you stop teams like the Mets. You know what? The Giants are a wealthy team. Go out and spend more than the Dodgers. I don't want any more excuses. There's still 30+ thousand people in the ballpark for a team that's 41-55. They have the money to spend. Believe me. They can go out and buy the Curran Theater. They can go out and buy some better free agents than Tyler Mahle and Adrian Hauser. No disrespect to those two guys, but the Giants have the money. It's not break-even season in San Francisco, and it's not break-even season when franchise valuations are skyrocketing around sports. The Seattle Seahawks just sold the other day for $9.6 billion. I know it's the NFL, but Major League Baseball franchises are doing quite well for themselves. Like I said, the long plodding season in the era of technology, people want the in real life experience. They do. They're going to show up to the ballpark. It's an outing. It's an adventure. You go to a different city. It's a great opportunity to take in a different part of that city's culture, to go to those baseball games. There are plenty of tourists who come to San Francisco and walk through the gates at Oracle Park and have a tremendous experience. but the Giants are the beneficiaries there. So I don't buy the salary cap nonsense that the owners are throwing out there. And I think that there are a lot of other issues that are just nowhere close between the Players Association and ownership, whether it's, the owners proposing to get rid of high schoolers in the Major League Baseball draft. I think that's a bad idea. I think you see some kids like Bryce Eldridge would be a sophomore at the University of Alabama right now. Come on. What are we doing? Bryce Eldridge was good enough. He did not need to go to the college level and go be a sophomore, hitting, 45 home runs in the SEC. Now, he's good enough being the San Francisco Giants first baseman, the face of the franchise at 21 years old. So all of that is to say there are a lot of different issues for them to hash out. But if they can't agree 2 years from now to have a nice, friendly talking point on the potential site of an all-star game, and that being San Francisco, Oracle Park in 2028, maybe I'm less of an optimist than I was before. Maybe this ongoing negotiation will continue deep into the offseason. There will be a lockout. So all of that is to say, who knows? But the commentary today from Rob Manfred and from Bruce Meyer, the executive director in an interim capacity for the Players Association, didn't inspire much confidence in yours truly. Up next, we'll continue our breakdown. No out-of-town scoreboard on the other side. We'll do one more segment here. No calls this evening. I appreciate everyone tuning in. If you're on the roads, please do get home safely. I am Kerry Crowley. The show is Sports Phone KBR. We're rolling with you till about 9:30 here on the Sports Leader.
We want your reaction, so give us a ring or blow up the text line at 415-808-KNBR. This is Sports Phone KNBR, streaming live at twitch.tv/The Sports Leader.
All right, we are back here on Sports Phone KNBR. Kerry Crowley wrapping up what turned into a very brief show this evening. Not a whole lot to talk about, not all that surprising considering, well, it's the weakest week in all of professional sports. And yes, we did have a World Cup game today, and it was, in my opinion, a bit of an upset for those of you who followed the tournament closely. I think that France had emerged as maybe the World Cup favorite, and Spain dismantling France today in just a dominant performance, a 2-0 victory. Obviously, the first goal coming on a penalty, and in a little bit of a controversial fashion, I would say, for those of you who've been watching the World Cup closely. But possession dominated by Spain, opportunities in front of the net dominated by Spain, and tomorrow we should have another dandy in the World Cup as England takes on Argentina. So with that, the MLB All-Star Game also took place this evening. We've covered it plenty this evening here on KNBR. The American League winning 4-0, not exactly the most riveting contest of all time. In fact, I would call this I would go as far to say this was a pretty disappointing All-Star game. 3 of the 4 runs scored came in the first inning off of National League starter Christopher Sanchez, who was pitching in front of his home crowd. Luis Arraez only gets 1 at bat for the San Francisco Giants. He did make some nice plays out at second base, though. I'll say that. 7th, 8th, and 9th innings. I think Luis Arraez had a put out in all 3 of those frames in relief of Ozzie Albies at second base. And you know what? Good for Luis Arraez that he was able to showcase his glove on national television and in front of the national audience, because he told reporters in Philadelphia on Monday, including Susan Slusser, the San Francisco Chronicle, and my colleague John Shea at the San Francisco Standard, that if he's traded by the San Francisco Giants, Arraez doesn't want to move positions, and nor should he, given the season that he's had defensively. He came to San Francisco because the Giants offered him the opportunity to play his preferred position. He's been outstanding, and he goes out there on the national stage tonight at Citizens Bank Park, handles some tough ground balls with a 4-6 putout in the 8th inning, I think, there. Arraez proved that he can play this position. He can play it at a high level, and any acquiring team should want to keep a guy who hits .330 pretty darn happy. Arraez having another great season, once again contending for a National League batting title, and if he's traded within the National League, I do think that by the end of the year he will outlast Otto Lopez, who did, by the way, have one of the 3 hits that the National League All-Stars produced. Juan Soto early in the game, Pete Crow Armstrong, and then Otto Lopez ends up with a hit in the 9th inning tonight for the National League against Aroldis Chapman, but it was not the National League's night tonight. It was, I said against Aroldis Chapman, it was against Brian Baker, who came in closer for the Tampa Bay Rays. Chapman got the first 2 outs of the 9th inning. The American League goes to the bullpen once more to get Brian Baker a look at the end of that ballgame. Not a save situation. Maybe things would have been different, but you know that John Schneider of the Toronto Blue Jays wanted to get as many guys work as possible this evening. So I guess with that, what we can do here to wrap up this evening's show, Raf's given me the signal. We've got to go. We've got to get out tonight. Let's just talk about a few things that you'd like to see from the San Francisco Giants in the second half of this 2026 season. And I mentioned this on Monday evening Sports Phone, but for a team that's definitely going to sell at the Major League Baseball trade deadline, and a team that is definitively playing for the future, 27, 28, 29, the Giants are in kind of this rare position where fans actually don't need them to lose every single game for a top draft pick, because the Giants moved up in the lottery this year. The Giants are already not allowed to pick in the top 10, or top 9, I should say, of the 2027 Major League Baseball draft. So it doesn't matter if this team loses 85, 90, 95, 100, 120 games, which I don't know is even statistically possible at this point for a team that's 41 and 55. It does not matter in the slightest. The best they can pick next year is number 10, and the teams that are going to be in contention for that number 10 pick with them, I think it's like the Chicago White Sox, the Minnesota Twins, other teams that were in the lottery this year. Giants are almost certainly going to have more losses than those teams. We're still contending for postseason berths. And at this point, I would say 24, 25 of Major League Baseball's 30 teams are contending for postseason berths. The Giants not among them. That makes them sellers. It's going to be a seller's market in July. So if you were Buster Posey, I've talked a lot about the farm system the last few nights. What you want to see during the second half of the season is a concentrated effort over the next 2-3 weeks to make as many improvements to the farm system as possible. That means trading Luis Arraez, trading Robbie Ray, and trading anyone who can bring you back future value in players who will contribute to your roster in 27, 28, and 29. It means taking some chances. It might mean for the San Francisco Giants eating some money, and those are uncomfortable conversations for Posey and Greg Johnson and the organization higher-ups to have. But you know what's an even more uncomfortable conversation? The fact that the Giants have not won a postseason series since Madison Bumgarner came out of the bullpen in 2014 against the Kansas City Royals in Game 7. It is an 11-plus year drought for this franchise that's going to be extended. The Giants must do whatever they can to ensure that that drought has a hope and a prayer of ending soon. And Posey has got to nail the next few weeks. And I do think that Posey and Michael Holmes, senior scouting director, did a really nice job at the draft over the course of the weekend. So what else do you want to see? Aside from the Giants acquiring more talent to come into this farm system, you want to see some young players continue to produce for you. And it's not just the young players at the bottom end of the roster who are trying to work their way into opportunities like a Victor Barracoto who's trying to prove himself. It's also a Casey Schmidt who, he's 27 years old. You can make the case that he's not that young anymore. He had an all-star caliber first half of the season. Don't let the disappointment of not being in Philadelphia on Tuesday evening discourage you, Casey, from putting up great numbers, from hitting 30 home runs, which is well within reach for a guy who's got 19 at this point, for driving in 85, 90 runs. He's got 50 at this point. Put up the numbers, prove that you belong next year. Leave no doubt if you're Casey Schmidt, if you're a Victor Barracoto, if you're a Bryce Eldridge, leave no doubt that going into next year, you're the Giants' number 2 hitter in the order. You are the guy who is hitting in that prime slot in the lineup, making sure that you're able to drive guys in, get a huge volume of at-bats. I think, getting Carson Whisenhunt some starts, bringing some guys up from AAA Sacramento, whether it be Joe Whitman or Matt Tugboat Wilkinson, who was acquired in that Patrick Bailey trade, that's an opportunity for the Giants during the second half of the season. And the other thing that I would really like to see during the second half of the season is a little bit more growth and comfort from manager Tony Vitello. And that's a little bit hard to describe here on Sports Talk Radio. But I'll say this. At no point during the first half of the season, and this goes back to spring training after Vitello was first hired to come into this organization out of the ranks of the University of Tennessee in the college level, did Tony ever look totally at ease? And I think some of that is to be expected. There are going to be growing pains. There's going to be the harsh reality that, there's 162 games and not 60 games like there are at the college level. You can't pick your players like you can at the University of Tennessee. Vitello inherited a veteran roster that I don't think was necessarily suited to a first-time Major League manager. And I would just like to see him become a little bit more comfortable making bullpen decisions, subbing veterans out of games, giving guys days off. Maybe, just maybe, if a guy makes a mental mistake, pulling him from a game. Like if a Willy Adames forgets to tag up, or an outfielder and Elliot Ramos forgets where to throw the ball. Maybe send a little bit of a message and show that you are in charge, show that you can provide the leadership that this organization needs entering 2027 and 2028. And I know that we discussed this early on in the show. Obviously, labor relations right now breaking down in Major League Baseball between the owners and the Players Association. It's unfortunate. It's a reality. Who knows what 2027 will look like? But if you're the Giants, you have to play and prepare as if you were going to have a season next year and act as if that season is make or break. Act as if that season is all about winning back the trust of fans, which has really, to me, been lost over the course of the first half of 2026. A lot of things did not go the Giants' way during the first half of this season. A 41-55 record speaks to that more than anything that I can say on this radio show here this evening. But I think the Giants owe it to their fans tonight, moving forward, to put this first half behind them and to try to do everything in their power to start winning again, to start building a foundation again, to build around your emerging star in Bryce Eldridge, to acquire talent that can supplement the farm system and win with him in the future, and for Tony Vitello and his coaching staff to get more comfortable. Because if they are going to be here next year, I think that's an open question. I think it's an open question for pretty much everyone in the organization, not named Logan Webb and Bryce Eldridge, if they are going to be around next year and they are going to be in a high-profile role, either making decisions, making daily calls on the lineup, or playing on the field, it's got to be better. Every element of this organization has got to be better. It has not been up to standard. It's not been up to expectations. And I'll tell you what, for as much as people like me in this position, in this chair, like to groan and complain and talk about why fans should be frustrated, and we have fans call up every night frustrated, angry, disappointed in the state of the San Francisco Giants, no one is taking this harder, and I mean this, I've seen him this season, than Buster Posey. No one is more frustrated, more angry, and more determined to dig the Giants out of this hole than Buster Posey. Now, is he the right person to do it? That's a question I can't answer. Time will tell. But I do know that he is laser focused on getting the Giants back to a respectable level. The one thing I can never question with Buster is his commitment to the franchise and his commitment to getting this right. He was there for the greatest moments in franchise history. He was instrumental. I said this last night. The farm system hasn't been this good since Buster spent opening day in 2010 with the Fresno Grizzlies, and he will be there at the darkest moments. The Giants are in one of those right now. He is a Giant through and through. It's the only uniform he ever wore. It's the uniform that he ultimately chose to represent in the front office as an owner and as an executive. And I do believe that regardless of whether you like his decisions, there are a lot that I disagree with. I do know that he is committed to trying to see this through and get this right. So we will see what the second half has in store for the San Francisco Giants. We'll be back on the air with Giants baseball on Friday. They are in Seattle. Up until then, we've got a full week of programming for you here on KNBR. I'll be on tomorrow afternoon with my friend Adam Copeland and our good buddy Danny Dunn running the show. But that will do it for me tonight. I want to thank our great producer, Rafael Corral, who always does such a good job. And I also want to thank all of you for sticking with KNBR through the All-Star break. I know that in the bleakest week of the sports calendar on an annual basis, you could go pretty much anywhere else and get your sports news. But the fact that you stuck with us tonight, the fact that you've stuck with us through this week, I really do appreciate it. I know that there are a lot of people out on vacation, whether you're in Tahoe, Clear Lake, or somewhere far-fetched, who aren't listening right now. But those of you working in the city, powering through this very warm July day, this unseasonably warm July day, appreciate all of you. It means so much to me to be able to sit here and talk to the fans and the listeners in the city that I grew up in, and I don't take it for granted anytime I get this opportunity. I was telling Carlos Ramirez, who's off to Miami right now, after his last sports phone, how much I've enjoyed working with him, how much I've enjoyed working with everyone at this station. And it's weeks like this where there's no 49ers football, no Warriors basketball, no Giants baseball, where just the opportunity to get a microphone and talk to the people that you love, the community that you love, the city and the region that you love, it still feels so darn special every single night. So first half didn't go as planned for the San Francisco Giants, but we shall see if there are better days ahead. And in 2 weeks, it won't matter if there are. 49ers football will begin, training camp will begin, and there will be 53 players to break down. And during training camp, there will be 90 players to break down. We'll be talking deep wide receiver depth chart. We'll be going in on Raheem Morris's secondary and the rookies that the 49ers picked up. It'll be Dejon Stribling season. So the Giants will soon have some competition on these airwaves, and they know it's time to make some moves and time to flourish. So for our producer, Rafael Corral, I'm your host, Kerry Crowley, signing off this evening. Thank you so much for listening, and please do get home safely. You're listening to Sports Phone KNBR right here on The Sports Leader.